This is number 24 from the 1994 chapter Math Count Sprint Round. And this is a very algebra-based problem. So I will show you how to get it to the point where you have to solve a quadratic equation. And if you don't know how to solve quadratic equations, then you're going to have to pay attention to what I'm doing, but then maybe go and look up how to use the quadratic formula. And so you start with, it says g is a positive number that is one more than its reciprocal. So we have g, and if you add 1 to, well, if you set g, it says it is equal to 1 more than its reciprocal. And so the reciprocal of g is just going to be 1 over g. Now, you have to go through and solve this equation. And so you're going to go through to solve it. We don't want to ever try to solve equations with variables in the denominator. So we're going to go through and multiply everything by g, so to get that g out of the denominator. And so that's going to give me g squared equals, well, 1 times g is g, so g times g is g squared, 1 times g is g, and then 1 times 1 over g is 1. And then when you've got quadratic equations, which means equations with an exponent of 2, you always want to subtract things from both until you get 0 on one side. So we're going to subtract g, and we're going to subtract 1 and get g squared minus g minus 1 equals 0. And then at this point, we're going to use the quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. It's called the quadratic formula, where a is the number in front of the g squared, b is the number in front of the g, and then c is this number. So b is negative 1 because it's negative g, so that's like a negative 1g. So negative 1 is 1, plus or minus the square root of, well, negative 1 squared is 1, minus 4. A is what's in front of the g squared, which is 1. C is this number, which is negative 1. So we're just plugging numbers into this quadratic formula. A is 1, so you get 2. So that gives you 1, and then you have plus or minus the square root of, and those negatives become positives. And so you get 1 plus or minus square root of 5 all over 2. Well, we don't want it to be negative because it's a number that's bigger than its reciprocal. And so we're going to say 1 plus square root of 5 over 2. Now, the hard part on this problem is, well, how do I find it to the nearest hundredth if I've got a radical? And that is very difficult. We can write this as 1/2, which is 0.5 plus, and you have to use some really good estimation techniques here. And the estimation techniques allow you to essentially try to estimate what the square root of 5 is, and then divide that by 2. And if you think about square root of 5, well, it's something bigger than 2, but the question is how much bigger. And you can start estimating by realizing that 2.2, if you square it, is 4.84. If you multiply 2.2 times 2.2. And then 2.3, if you square it, is 5.29. And so you can see that 5 is closer to the 4.84 than the 5.29. So then we might think it's around 2.24, because it's not quite 2.25, but it's not probably 2.23. So when we divide that by 2, that gives us 1.12, and 0.5 plus 1.12 is 1.62, which is the correct answer. That is a very difficult problem to go through and do that estimation, and actually one that you don't see show up on MATHCOUNTS tests anymore. But knowing how to get to this answer, yes, you definitely could see that show up on MATHCOUNTS.